folks. Welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Show. My name is Matt.
And I'm Erin.
And we are the Ingolds. We're the founders of Metanoia Catholic, a Catholic life coaching company. And we help our clients become students of their interior life. We help people to think rationally. We know that once people start to think, use that God-given gift of their intellect, they will find God. So we want to help some people do that today. We're going to be focusing on a little bit of a bridge, an addendum to our last episode that we had, which was when loving somebody is not really loving them, when we're trying to change somebody, even with the best of intentions, and the ways of which we go about doing that. And it really touched on the subject that we're going to be speaking on today, which has to do with responsibility. Who is responsible for what? And that's the title, actually, of our episode today.
Yes.
Who is responsible for what?
Yeah, John Paul II, Saint John Paul II spoke a lot about love and responsibility and how the two have to work together, and that you can't have one without the other, really. So the reason why we wanted to break this down is because a lot of questions would come up from what we actually spoke about last podcast or last show. It's when we were talking about just the different ways of loving somebody, and really the trajectory of questioning that comes from that is, okay, so who am I responsible for? What am I responsible for? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
And what is God responsible for is another big part of it.
Yes.
So yeah, I think really when we dive into a little bit, we love going to John Paul II because he's this awesome, right? Yeah. And he thought about these things. And he thought about them so deeply. And he starts to explore this question of like, what is meant by responsibility? Okay, and first we want to like arrive at that definition here first.
And we're going to get to that. But first, we are going to teach you one of our basic tools that we use at Metanoia Catholic.
Awesome.
And this is really helpful because it will actually lay the groundwork for responsibility. Okay? So,
we're going to head on over to the board.
Can you guys see it? Okay.
Good.
First, we have circumstances. Do we need to get closer with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Yay!
Thanks, guys.
Can you guys see it? Okay. First, we have circumstances. These are things that we take in through our common sense power. Our common sense power are our senses. And basically, all 5 of our senses, what we hear, what we see, what we smell, taste, touch, comes together and creates a unified database to kind of bring into our mind, our imagination, and our memory. So a circumstance is something from the outside world coming in, and we don't have a thought about it immediately. Even though it feels so immediate, it happens so quickly that we think we just know something as soon as, it comes into our mind. It does happen pretty immediately.
So say if you got a text message from somebody, the circumstances would be literally the words that were written in that text message and the emojis that they used. If they used emojis.
Circumstances are facts. They're, and we can't argue with facts. They're truth, so we take them in, and then we have a thought about them, which is our interpretation of those things. And the reason why we're making this distinction is a lot of people don't make this distinction. And
it gets them into trouble.
And we fall into this shame, blame trap where we blame the circumstances often. And it's really what we've just taken in through our common sense power, and then we have a thought about it.
Yeah, in and of themselves, circumstances, like Erin said before, they're neutral. There's no fun story assigned to them. They're boring. They don't really have any sort of meaning. They just are. Okay? We're the ones that are ultimately going to assign a meaning to them, and that meaning is going to come specifically through the thought that we choose to think about those circumstances.
And then we have our thoughts, our interpretation, or the story about those things that we take in. Then we have our emotions. And our emotions spring from our thoughts. And we know this even neurologically. Every time a thought is brought into the conscious level of your mind, it actually releases a molecule of emotion. And an emotion is something that we feel. It's like a release of chemicals, neurotransmitters all throughout our body, and we feel it in our body. That's why we call them feelings. You know, we use those words, emotions and feelings, interchangeably.
And this is super powerful, and I think there's something that's very dignified in this, because what we're learning is the way that the invisible becomes visible, right? Like, we have a thought, and a thought is something that we can't necessarily see, but we're now, with the different types of technology that we have, the PET scans, the brain scans, we're actually able to see the firing of a synaptic connection in our head associated with a thought. So we have something invisible, right? This thought that's being made visible, we can actually see it. It's being made manifest. Those molecules of emotion that Aaron spoke about there, those chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, and hormones, if you want to really nerd out about it, are those things that actually go throughout our body, and they communicate different things to our bodies. Sometimes they'll communicate that a specific organ needs to release a certain hormone, right? When we become consciously aware of the chemical change in our body, it's kind of a boring scientific way of saying that's an emotion, right? It's a conscious awareness of a chemical change in our body, all right? So there's something very incarnational with this, words becoming flesh.
And there's something very ordered and integrated about this. And the Lord made us this way.
Yes.
And so this is why we're teaching it to you, because when you know this anthropology, when you know this order, now you can put something in each one of these categories.
You can choose it.
And
like
you can
will
choose it, which is what we're getting to. But,
Sorry.
so we spring from our thoughts. This is what emotions do. Now, what do emotions lead to? It's what our emotions lead us to do something or to not do something. That is our behavior, that is our action. And here's another thing that I want to kind of give to you guys today. Emotions are neither good nor evil. What actually creates them, creates a morality around them, is what we do from them. Okay?
And really the fruits that come forth from
Yes,
those things.
right.
What
which we create.
Yeah, and this is drawn directly from the Catechism. The Catechism doesn't necessarily say that an act in and of itself, like we can necessarily confine morality to an act in and of itself, or a thought, or an emotion in and of itself.
Yeah, no, you can
Or, like,
with an act.
With an act.
Yes.
Excuse me, with an act.
Yeah.
And then certainly by the fruits of that is going to be, Christ says, by the fruits you shall
Yes.
know.
So the fruits come from the behaviors, that which we create with the Lord or not, right? So the reason why I'm telling you guys all of this is what we're responsible for in our own lives. I am not responsible for Matt's thoughts. I'm not responsible for his emotions or his behaviors. I'm also not responsible to change these circumstances. I can, if this actually becomes more integrated that way. I have that choice. I could maybe try to change some circumstances. We see a lot of people playing in this place a lot, trying to change circumstances, and they're just really overexerting themselves and exhausting themselves when really they might not know that our thoughts are our choices. And this is great news, because our thoughts lead to our emotions, which lead to our behaviors. How many of you out there actually is like, well, this just happened to me, and so therefore I did this? You just jumped way ahead. But there was a thought and there was an emotion in there somewhere. And so slowing down the process is incredibly helpful. And actually to put in, and this is what we take you through in our journal. And so where does our responsibility lie? It lies here. And I want to actually support it with a quote from John Paul II. And this is from Love and Responsibility. He says, each individual, in fact, has moral responsibility for the acts which he personally performs. See? No one can be exempted from this responsibility. And on the basis of it, everyone will be judged by God himself. So he's saying every person is in charge of this. And why is that important? Because our thoughts lead to our emotions, which lead to our behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes just the way that people will jump so quick over the thought. Like, because the emotions are things, they happen instantly. I mean, those chemical messengers, that they can initiate that chemical change in the body so quickly. And they're very personal. Like, we can feel that they're very honest in and of themselves. But we miss the fact that there's some sort of story that's being associated with that. And here's what I mean. How many times, Aaron, you brought up how often people can jump to the behavior and they can blame the circumstance? How many times have we been in the same circumstances as somebody else, and we have one take on it and one emotional response, and they have a completely different take on it and a different emotional response? I think about Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. The man lived 4 years in a concentration camp. His wife was killed. He lost so many members of his family, and so many people emerged from those camps being very, very bitter towards the world and towards existence. But for some reason, this man chose a different perspective. And he recognized this model. He recognized this anthropology in the way that we were created as human beings. And he started to choose deliberately the thoughts he was going to apply to those circumstances. And folks, it made all the difference, and it does. It makes all the difference.
And he created his life's work from that.
Yeah.
So he co-created something incredibly helpful that actually helped other people.
Yeah, fruits that will last,
Yes.
indeed.
So why we're bringing this up for the responsibility for you all to know where your responsibility is too, and to also fight against kind of the triggered culture. We see this a lot too. Something in this line will happen, and then people will immediately go here and say, that triggered me, so I'm feeling triggered. It's like, no, you're feeling triggered because you had a thought, an interpretation that actually you get to choose. And that's what we do as mindset coaches. We teach people how to choose these things and slow this process down and choose something new so that they can be renewed or transformed by the renewing of their mind.
Yeah. Romans 12:2. Romans 12:2.
So
Be
this is
transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yes, this is very important when it comes to who's responsible for what, right? And also we want to get into self-possession a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is also John Paul II.
Yeah. So he talks about self-possession, self-governance, and self-determination as really those things that we have as human beings that kind of defines the responsibility, but also the boundaries of where my responsibility begins and ends and somebody else's begins and ends. There are boundaries here, and when we can operate in those boundaries, we're going to operate in a way that's a lot more peaceful. So how do we break these down a little bit more, Aaron?
Yes, so self-possession is the person's actions, once again, the behaviors, flow from the point of authority over themselves. That's self-possession. Basically, remember, our emotions are what lead us to our actions, and our thoughts lead us to our emotions.
Yeah, even that word emotion, is it Latin? Emovere? Emovere, I think it comes from?
Yeah, it means X, well, it comes from X, which is outward, and movere, which is to move. So it's a movement outward. It actually, inclines us towards something.
Yes, so the
Sort of
emotions that
doing
we
something.
have will, incline us towards another action. Now, it doesn't predetermine the action. We still have will to be able to intervene and disrupt, right? And this is where people live a lot of the time, right? Their emotions are pushing them to act a certain way because they haven't really managed their thoughts. And then they just try to white knuckle, and it's pushing them perhaps towards a vicious way of acting. And they try to white knuckle their way to act virtuously. And so we have this kind of tension that they feel where their interior life's pushing them one way, their exterior life is pushing them like they're forcing it another way. And so there's a lack of integrity that's here. This isn't Christian piety. This is perhaps the beginning of the purgative way that you're entering into at this point. But ultimately, we want to get to the point where there's an integration, where we're acting in, our behaviors are integrated with our emotional life, stemming from those choices, those thoughts that we are choosing about our circumstances.
Well, and you just said it. So emotional well-being or emotional balance comes from mental well-being. Like, it springs directly from that. So often, and I know we spoke about this in our last class, but we abdicate our emotional well-being over to other people's behaviors. That is not how this works. we have a thought about somebody's behaviors and then we have an emotion from it. And so to know this is so powerful and so liberating, actually. So we don't have to wait for people to change to feel better.
Right. So that's self-possession. Self-governance. Tell me about that, Erin.
It's a quality that allows a person to order their actions to fulfill their existential ends. So these are all really big words, and I'd love to break it down for you. Basically, the person's ability to choose what they were created for, which is God and their greatest goodness, and really what is most fulfilling for them. So self-possession is a person's actions flow from the point of authority over themselves. So we really can't be triggered people, right? If we have authority over ourselves, if we have self-possession. And then self-governance is the quality that allows a person to order their actions.
Yeah, and there's something that another quote that comes up from John Paul II in this is where he says that it's better to allow somebody to do evil than to force them to do good. Right? There's something in here where just the freedom even to do something that is not necessarily going to be very life-giving for you. That is so important, to just protect that responsibility for that person, because if we take that away, we're going to ultimately take away their ability to love and to experience God's love and to really discern for themselves who God is and what they were called to do. Right?
Yep. And the third one is self-determination. And basically, if you were to look at it as like a formula, it's self-possession plus self-governance equals self-determination. It's the outcome of these two together. And it's that what we determine how our personhood develops in the real world and not in a theoretical construct. So basically, it's how we experience the world, how we show up in the world, and what we create in the world. That's self-determination.
Beautiful.
I think a lot of people have a hard time with these terms because they think that this is a usurpation of God in their life. Well, I mean, self-possession kind of sounds like a scary term too. You know, like, isn't that narcissistic? Well, no. I mean, if it's abused, of course it can become narcissistic, and I wouldn't even call it self-possession. But it's when a person takes authority over themselves, like that authority that God has given to you, and stewards it well. Now that is a person living an integrated life and living a life, just living in a disposition to receive the Lord in the way that He created us to be.
They're also very enabled to love as well. Because you think about self-possession, you can't give what you don't have. So self-possession paves the way for self-donation, which is very much love at that point. I'm a free gift. I'm giving this gift freely. I have it in my possession to be even able to give it to you.
I think of sincere gift of self, which is another John Paul II quote. What is it? Man cannot
know himself except for the sincere gift of self.
Yeah, the word sincere actually comes from, like, there's a couple words that it comes from, but it's pure or whole. And so I look at a self-possessed, self-governed, and self-determined person as being a pure gift of self. And so often we go to others to give, to actually receive. But in order to be a sincere gift of self, we need to have that authority over ourselves and to have that governance and determination. And so that's what we're going to talk about today and break it down for you guys in a practical way. But keep in mind this model, this anthropology. This, if you walk away with nothing from this class or this video, you need to remember this and actually start applying it to your life, because this is so, so powerful in these steps towards self-possession, self-governance, and self-determination.
So when we come back, we're going to go on a little bit of a break, but when we come back, we're actually going to be doing a couple of little examples of scenarios where this is actually playing out and where people kind of trip up a little bit and how they can grow in their self-possession and grow in their responsibility. We'll see you in a moment. Welcome back, folks. We've just been talking about responsibility with our show here, Who is Responsible for What? We gave a little bit of a background of the way that circumstances show up in our lives, and we have thoughts about those which we can choose, and emotions then ensue, and behaviors will often follow, right? And how oftentimes people fail to take responsibility for the things that they choose to believe or think in their interior life, and therefore the emotions and behaviors that follow. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to get a little bit more practical. We're going to go over to the whiteboard. We're going to do a little bit of a whiteboard session on this one with a can scenario that we've got. So Erin has already got our stuff laid out over here. Can you explain what we've got here in our example for our guests?
Yes, we'll call him Bob.
Bob.
There's Bob.
Hey, Bob.
There he is. So, Bob had this scenario. He texted a friend, "Want to hang out?" And that friend responded, "No." So Bob has a choice. Here's his circumstance. Can you guys see? See? That's the circumstance. That is the thing that happened. Friend said no to text invites. Bob has a choice of what he can think about this. And then from that thought comes the emotion, which comes from his responsibility. Now remember, this choice also leads to your responsibility and how much of a self-possessed person you are, right? Okay, so what's one way that Bob can think about it, Matt? What do you think?
Wow, that was rude.
Okay, so Bob can think, wow, that was rude. And what do you think he would be feeling while thinking that thought?
Well, I've certainly had this response, even myself, to some of these kind of abrupt texts. And I even like the words that I'm using right now, these abrupt text messages. I mean,
aggressive.
if I'm just saying, like, looking at the circumstances, all it is like he said no. Like 2 letters, complete sentence, no. All right, complete response, answered my question exactly how I put it, just said no. No emoji attached to it or anything like that. So, but there's been times where I've had these text messages that are just like this, and my thought is like, man, he's rude, or man, there's something wrong. I don't want to give too many different examples here. Let's just go with, wow, that was rude.
Okay, wow, that was rude. And then how do you think he would feel if he was thinking, wow, that was rude?
Maybe hurt.
Hurt?
Maybe
Okay.
hurt, but like hurt a lot of the time doesn't last too long. It eventually goes to anger.
Or
real quick,
defensiveness.
Or defensiveness.
Yep.
And so, because we don't like to sit in hurt. So let's go with defensive. I like defensive.
Okay. Okay. So he feels defensive. We can just draw this emoji. I think that's like, It's like an angry, kind of defensive look. So, defensive. And then what do you think he does from this place of defensiveness?
All right. So if I'm putting myself in Bob's shoes, Bob may silent treatment.
Okay.
May not respond.
Silent treatment to friend.
To friend, Bob may start to stew on some different scenarios on what could be going on. Bob may start to think things like, man, he always does this, or man, why can't he just be a little bit more considerate? He's so inconsiderate. So like Bob could even go down the path of
Becoming
starting
rude?
to like demonize his friend.
Bob becomes rude.
Bob becomes rude. Wow, words become flesh.
That's it. Well, and also he probably would talk to somebody else about it. Like, hey, does this happen with you, with this friend?
Hey, remember the friend was like, has this friend been rude to you too? Like
Yes.
this friend is just like so rude. Like he did such a rude text message. Like pretty much called me a bleep like on this text message. And we start to even like change the circumstances a little bit more. Like we start thinking these thoughts that start to even add some language. Like when we just look at the clean circumstances here, all he said was no. But sometimes we can add on to that. It's like, no, I don't want to hang out with you. Or no, I'm kind of annoyed with you. Or no,
I can't right now.
I can't right now. Or I don't feel like it. And like, I can't right now is even something where it's just like, no, I can't right now. And that's kind of like Okay, well, like there's a little bit of a justification, but like, or I'm entitled for some sort of justification or reason why you're telling me no right now, but it's just a flat no. Yeah, so we can see how this can really spiral pretty quickly, right, Aaron?
Yeah, so again, what is Bob responsible for and what is he not responsible for?
Right. Well, we can't change the circumstances. Those just happen. Bob doesn't have any will over the circumstance. But he chose the thought. And he may have chose it so quick that it just flew right past his conscious into the subconscious. Maybe it's just like a way that Bob, like maybe Bob is known for being the person that really takes things out of context and kind of inflate things. We all have friends like that. But Bob's responsible for the thought, and therefore he's responsible for the emotion that ensues from that thought and the behaviors that then stem forth from that.
How else could Bob have thought about this? Which is his choice. Remember?
Yeah, like, so I think of a way, perhaps like a healthier way.
What's a self-possessed person?
A self-possessed way could be like, great, thanks for giving me an answer. Yeah, like I appreciate, it might even be like, I appreciate my friend's candidness.
Yes.
I appreciate their
So let's do
speed
that one.
and like just getting back to me so quickly and abruptly. Like what?
I appreciate
my friend being honest with me.
my friend's candid honesty. Right?
Yeah. Like even something like that, I can start to think like, wow, like this is a really good friendship. Like the fact that they feel so comfortable with me that they can just be so abrupt, but and so honest with me, like there's some good trust that's there. That's one way of thinking.
So how would you feel if you thought that way?
I feel respected.
Respected. Okay.
Yeah.
And then from that respect, would these behaviors be around or would it be different ones?
Yeah, I mean, like I might just like text back like, hey, thanks for getting back to me so quick. Like that might be one of the actions. And like all of the things that I was doing before where I'm stewing on the scenario on why my friend was such a jerk for saying no to me, like that all goes away. So like what shows up in the behavior line too, folks, is not just the things that you do, but it's also those things you stop doing, right? I don't necessarily feel when I'm in this emotion of respected, I don't feel this need to defend myself and come up with all these ways that Bob is like hurting me, or that, no, in this case, I'm Bob, like where my friend is hurting me, right? I can actually, you know, now in that emotion of feeling respected, like I can start to project that onto somebody else. I show up as a respectful person at that, respectful of their freedom, respectful of their own self-possession, and their ability to say no, and their own self-determination and self-governance as well.
Yeah. I love it. So this is an example of how our thoughts lead to our emotions, which lead to our behaviors, which, do not forget this. This is what we are responsible for. This is self-possession. When we take these things into account and we stop abdicating everything else over to other people, we move out of that shame, blame trap, you know, that way of relating to others, and we go, I wonder what my thought is about this person's behavior. Because we put other people's behaviors in here.
And I think that's a really good way to kind of like a good thing to give y'all today. In fact, on that is oftentimes we're aware of the emotion before we're aware of the thought. Again, it happens so quickly, those chemical changes, and we can just become aware of the feeling first. And so often we just say that this is definitely tied to reality, but really it's not. It's tied to an interpretation of circumstances, okay? So perhaps the invitation here, Aaron, is for our listeners to just kind of be curious when they feel that emotion, to kind of just be curious about it. And perhaps even ask the question like, if this emotion had a voice, what would it say? And just asking that question, getting curious, like, what's the thought that's lurking behind this emotion? That's something that's going to help you grow into a more self-possessed person. Because if we're defaulting to kind of the consistent way of thinking that we're just used to and it's comfortable for us, and that could be a way that's leading us down a path towards vice or towards hurting other people or being disrespectful, or in this case where Bob was starting to get passive aggressive and being rude. Sometimes we have those defaults, but it's not by white knuckling our way later on down the model here, so to speak, where we're just trying to change our behaviors without really getting curious about what's going on interiorly. Remember, what is invisible will always be made visible in and through the body. And John Paul II speaks of this all the time in his theology of the body.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we can leave with all of you is a way to determine between a circumstance and a thought, because that's very powerful. And it's just one simple question. Is that true 100% of the time? Is that thought true 100% of the time? That's how we know if it's actually based on facts or our interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm. So an example with that in this, like we can agree 100% of the time the words that were in the text message. I mean, we can pull the phone up, we can take a look, everybody else can look at it, it holds up in court. It's real hard evidence. Those are facts. Those are our circumstances. But Bob might say that, like, my friend was disrespectful towards me. Like, there's not really, you can't necessarily 100% of the time, like, you can't necessarily say that was going on, like, as a hard and fast fact in this.
And
in this
let's
situation.
just say his friend says no, and I am clearly disrespecting you. Let's just say we could put that in the circumstance line. Bob still has a choice on a thought, what he wants to think about that.
Yeah.
We could be like, my friend is so funny. Isn't that funny? That my friend, you know, he could have a different thought. It doesn't have to be
Or
like.
the thought could be like, I'm so happy I don't have to waste time on this person now. I can actually go and spend some time with the people that I really do love and that appreciate me, and there's a mutual respect that's there.
Yeah.
Cool.
So thanks for coming on our ride with us, and we'll see you guys again soon.
You get to choose your thoughts. There's something incredibly liberating about this. Choose wisely. Words become flesh. Take care. God bless.
Bye.